like to pretend. And there is this kind of blurring of whether it's public or private. But the main reason that people don't know about it is because these people are powerful and they don't want you to know.
What do you see, or why are they actually meeting, and what are the long-term goals for the planet? What do you think that they are actually really plotting in the long term? If they're meeting once a year to decide little goals, surely they've got a long-term strategy for the planet.
Yes, quite probably. I mean, they're not letting us into that secret, but it's quite clear they're about acquiring wealth. The whole organisation is set up to acquire more and more wealth. Whether it's through takeovers of countries. I mean, they were involved, for example, in 2002, the Bilderberg conference was the first time that I and many other people heard that there was which is leaks from that conference, that there was a serious attempt to invade Iraq. This leaked out of that conference. This is one of the things that's actually it's quite easy to get leaks from these conferences by talking, for example, to the hotel staff, because a lot of the people who are serving them, I mean, don't necessarily agree with what's going on in their hotel, and they're quite prepared to have a quiet chat to a journalist if they can be bothered to ask. The other thing is that you've got people who are now involved in diplomatic services around Europe and in other parts of the world who are leaking material to do with the Bilderbergs. The Bilderbergers don't take any notice of national boundaries. They see themselves as internationalists, NATO internationalists. And so they do end up sometimes rubbing up the wrong way people from embassies. And so we've seen sometimes embassies leaking material onto the internet, and much to the annoyance of the Bilderbergs. And so there are all sorts of ways that this information does come out. I mean, the Bilderberg people were very much involved in the former Yugoslavia and the Kosovo war. They were pushing for that. And these people are very clever. Lord Carrington, who was the chairman for a while, back in the 1990s, he was actually putting articles in the newspaper saying, "Oh, I don't think that Bosnia, the Kosovo conflict is necessarily a good idea." But of course, he was part of a Bilderberg meeting where these kinds of policies were pushed through. I mean, they'll say that we don't push through the policies there. No, but what they do is they find the politicians who are on side, and they make sure those politicians make it into their positions. I mean, this is another thing that the Bilderbergers are up to, is they are basically interviewing potential leaders of countries. Say, for example, opposition, when Tony Blair was in opposition, leader of the Labour Party in opposition back in the early 1990s, he came along to the Bilderberg conference, they liked him, and the next year he had, Jon S had died, and Tony Blair was made the leader of the Labour Party, leader of the opposition in Britain. So it's a kind of interviewing process. I don't think the Bilderbergers like the idea that any country might actually be beyond their control, because they're basically greedy control freaks.
What would you suggest to people who are watching this to check out what you're saying is true? How would you suggest for them to do that? And what can, after they find out what you're saying is true, how can they actually do something about it?
Well, one of the best papers that's ever been written on the Bilderbergs was written back in the early 90s by Mike Peters. Mike's retired now, but he's a professor of sociology at Leeds Metropolitan University. It's an academic paper. It's about something like 7 or 8, 9, 10 pages, but it's all fully referenced, and it explains what Bilderberg is. He's going back really to the origins of it, gives quotes and examples of how Bilderberg has deeply affected policy, particularly with regard to the development of the European Union and the Euro, and the project for European unification. In fact, his paper is called Bilderberg and the Project for European Unification. So that's a really good academic, and very readable academic paper on the subject, as well as increasingly we're seeing some of the press around the world, like WorldNet Daily, The Guardian and other newspapers, actually starting to cover Bilderberg seriously. For years and years, I think there was a lot of the journalists and editors in some of the more independent-minded